My parents claimed they were too broke to save my daughter's life, yet days later, they handed my sister $140,000 for a vanity project. Heartbroken but determined, I realized I held the deed to their comfortable life, so I sold it out from under them. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The humming of the machines in the pediatric ward had become the soundtrack of my life. It was a low, rhythmic drone that usually faded into the background, but today it felt deafening. It was the sound of time running out. I sat in the stiff vinyl chair next to Lily's bed, watching her chest rise and fall under the thin hospital blanket. She was 6 years old, but in that massive bed, surrounded by tubes and wires, she looked so much smaller. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, a stark contrast to the colorful drawings she had taped to the wall just days before she was admitted again. I checked my phone for the 100th time that hour. The screen remained blank. No texts, no missed calls, just the date, glaring back at me, mocking the deadline that was approaching like a freight train. Dr. Aris had been clear. The congenital defect in Lily's heart was progressing faster than they had anticipated. The standard procedures weren't working. She needed the reconstruction surgery, the one performed by the specialist in Boston, and she needed it within the month. The insurance company had denied the claim for the third time, citing it as experimental, leaving me with a bill of nearly $150,000 just to book the operating room and the surgical team. I had liquidated my 401k, I had sold my car, I had moved into a smaller apartment, I had scraped together everything I had, but I was still short, desperately short. That was why I had gone to my parents. The memory of the meeting 3 days ago played on a loop in my mind, a jagged shard of glass in my gut. I had driven to their lake house, the sprawling, beautiful property 2 hours north of the city that they had lived in for the past decade. I had sat at their mahogany dining table, my hands trembling as I laid out the spreadsheets, the denial letters, and the surgeon's timeline. I asked for a loan, not a gift. A loan. I offered to sign a promissory note with interest. I knew they had the money. Dad had retired with a substantial package, and they lived virtually expense-free. "We just don't have that kind of liquidity right now, Emily," my father, Robert, had said, not meeting my eyes. He was busy polishing his glasses, a nervous tic he had whenever he was lying or uncomfortable. "The market has been volatile. Our assets are tied up." "It's for Lily," I had choked out, pushing the photo of their granddaughter across the table. "Dad, Mom, it's her heart. If we don't do this, she goes into heart failure. It's not a matter of if, it's when." My mother, Linda, had sighed, reaching out to pat my hand with a cold, distant affection. "We know, sweetie, and we are praying for her. But you have to understand, that money is our security. If we dip into the principal now, we might outlive our savings. We have to be prudent. Maybe you can start a GoFundMe or apply for those charity grants." "I've applied for everything," I had whispered. "There's no time." "We just can't risk our future, Emily," Dad had said, finally putting his glasses back on. The finality in his voice was like a door slamming shut. "We simply cannot do it." I had left that day feeling a level of abandonment I didn't know existed. I felt orphaned, despite my parents being very much alive. I drove back to the city in a daze, the rejection sitting heavy in my chest. But sitting here now, in the dim light of the hospital room, the true blow landed. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. I didn't follow my sister, Vanessa. For my own mental health, I had muted her years ago. But this was a tag from a mutual family friend, a cousin who didn't know the war that was brewing. I unlocked the phone and opened the app. The image that loaded on the screen made the air leave my lungs. It was a photo of my sister, Vanessa, standing in front of a massive, empty retail space in the most expensive district of downtown. She was holding a giant pair of ceremonial scissors, a bottle of champagne in the other hand. My parents were standing on either side of her, beaming with pride. Dad's arm was around her shoulders. Mom was holding a bouquet of roses. The caption read, "So excited to finally announce my dream come true. Vane's Vanity is officially coming soon. Huge shout out to the best investors in the world, Mom and Dad, for believing in my vision and fronting the $140K startup capital to make this happen. Girl boss fashion mogul family support." $140,000. The number screamed at me. It was the exact amount I had asked for. It was the exact amount needed to save Lily's heart. I stared at the photo. I stared at my father's smile, the same man who had told me 3 days ago that they had no liquidity. I stared at my mother, who had told me to start a GoFundMe while she handed a check to my sister for a clothing boutique that would likely fail within a year, just like her jewelry line, her podcast, and her lifestyle blog. My vision blurred, but not with tears. This wasn't sadness. This was something hotter, darker, and infinitely more powerful. I looked from the glowing screen of the phone to the rhythmic rise and fall of my daughter's chest. They had made a choice. They had weighed the life of my 6-year-old daughter against a boutique for my 29-year-old sister, and they had chosen the boutique. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. The next 48 hours were a blur of mechanical motion. I went through the motions of being a mother and a human being, but inside I was hollowed out, replaced by a cold, vibrating rage. I didn't confront them immediately. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth to speak to my mother, I knew I would scream until my throat bled. I needed to be surgical. I needed to be like the doctors trying to fix Lily, precise, steady, and lethal to the problem at hand. I stayed at the hospital, sleeping in the chair, showering in the communal bathroom down the hall. Every time the nurses came in to check Lily's vitals, I felt a fresh wave of panic, followed immediately by a fresh wave of hatred for the people who could have stopped this panic with a single signature. On the second day, my mother actually called. I stared at the ID, Mom, flashing on the screen. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the lie in her voice one more time to solidify my resolve. "Hello," my voice sounded raspy, unrecognizable to my own ears. "Emily, how are you holding up?" Her voice was bright, chirpy. It was the voice of a woman who hadn't just condemned her granddaughter to a game of Russian roulette. "How is Lily?" "She's stable," I said, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "We're just waiting." "Good, good. Listen, we're planning a little celebration dinner for Vanessa this weekend. Sunday night. We'd love for you to come. I know things are tight, with the hospital and all, but it would mean so much to her to have her big sister there to support her new venture." The audacity took my breath away. They wanted me to come celebrate the money they had denied my dying daughter. They wanted me to clap for the boutique that was built on Lily's potential grave. "A celebration," I repeated, my voice flat. "Yes, it's all happening so fast. She found this perfect location, and the landlord required a year's rent up front plus the build-out costs, so we just decided to dive in. It's going to be magnificent, Emily. She's finally found her calling." "You found the liquidity then?" I asked, the words slipping out sharper than I intended. There was a pause on the other end, a hesitation. "Well, we moved some things around. We made it work. You know how passionate Vanessa is. We couldn't crush her dream." Couldn't crush her dream. But crushing Lily's chance at a future was acceptable collateral damage. "I see," I said. "Sunday, I'll check the hospital schedule." "Oh, do try, and bring Lily if she's up to it." "She's in heart failure, Mom. She's not up to a dinner party." Right, of course. Well, maybe get a sitter, just for an hour." I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I just pressed the red button and let the phone drop into my lap. I looked over at Lily. She was awake, watching cartoons on the small TV mounted on the arm of the bed. She turned to me, her eyes large and trusting. "Was that Grandma?" "Yes, baby," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. "Is she coming to visit?" "No, sweetie, she's busy." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gray parking lot below. My reflection in the glass looked haggard. Dark circles, messy hair, a wrinkled blouse. I looked like a victim. I looked like the responsible daughter they had always taken for granted, the one who would just figure it out, the one who would never make a scene. They thought the conversation was over. They thought the money was gone, spent on Vanessa's lease and inventory, safe from my desperate grasping. They thought they had successfully managed their assets and their daughters, keeping the golden child happy while managing the expectations of the scapegoat. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. It was something so fundamental, so buried in the paperwork of the past decade, that they had genuinely wiped it from their memories. They had lived in that beautiful Lake See for 10 years. They had renovated the kitchen, planted the garden, and hosted every Thanksgiving there. They called it their home. I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. I didn't open the browser to search for loans or grants. Instead, I opened a folder titled Family Archives and scrolled down to a subfolder labeled 2016 Bankruptcy and Recovery. I opened the PDF. It was a property deed. At the top of the document, in clear, bold letters, it listed the owner of the property at 442 Lakeview Drive. It didn't say Robert and Linda Miller. It said Emily Miller. I stared at my name on the legal document. I remembered the day I signed it. I remembered their tears, their fear of losing everything when Dad's business went under, and how I, the fresh-faced financial analyst, had used my credit and my first big bonus to buy the house so they wouldn't be homeless. I remembered them promising to buy it back as soon as we're back on our feet. They never did. They just paid the utilities and lived there, and over time, we all just pretended it was theirs. They acted like the lords of the manor, and I was just the guest. I closed the laptop with a soft click. The sound echoed in the quiet room. "Mommy," Lily asked, "are you okay?" I turned back to her, and for the first time in days, the crushing weight on my chest felt a little lighter. "I'm okay, baby," I said, walking over and kissing her forehead. "In fact, I think I figured out how to fix everything." To understand why this betrayal cut so deep, you have to understand the ecosystem of my family. I was the eldest, the fixer, the safety net. Vanessa was the youngest, the dreamer, the perpetual victim of her own bad decisions. 10 years ago, my father's manufacturing business collapsed. It was a slow-motion train wreck caused by his refusal to adapt to new technology and a series of bad investments. They were facing total bankruptcy. They were going to lose the house, the cars, the status, everything. I was 24, just 2 years into my career as a corporate financial analyst. I was living in a shoebox apartment, eating ramen, and saving every penny to build a life. When the call came, I didn't hesitate. I was the good daughter. I structured the deal. I bought the lake house, a smaller but still premium property compared to their old mansion, under my name because their credit was shot. I put down the down payment. I carried the mortgage for the first 2 years until Dad's pension kicked in and he could take over the monthly payments. But the deed stayed with me. It was a safety measure, a way to protect the asset from their creditors. Over the years, as they regained their financial footing, the narrative shifted. They stopped thanking me. They started acting as if the house was their divine right. They renovated the master bath without asking me. They built a deck. They treated me like a visitor in my own property. I let it slide. I didn't need the power trip. I just wanted them to be secure. And then there was Vanessa. Vanessa was 29 going on 16. She was beautiful, charismatic, and completely allergic to actual work. She had dropped out of college to pursue modeling, which turned into acting, which turned into influencing. My parents subsidized her entire life. When she needed a new car because she crashed hers, Dad wrote a check. When she needed rent for a loft she couldn't afford, Mom handled it. They called it supporting her creative journey. I called it enabling a parasite. But I had never asked for anything. Not until now, not until Lily. I spent the rest of the afternoon digging into Vanessa's new business. It wasn't hard. Vanessa broadcasted her entire life on social media. I found the real estate listing for the boutique's location. It was prime retail space. The lease terms in that district were brutal, minimum 3-year commitment, personal guarantees required. I saw the posts about the contractors she had hired for the glam renovation. I saw the sneak peeks of the inventory, overpriced, fast fashion knockoffs that she was planning to sell at a 500% markup. And then I saw the post that made my blood run cold. It was a video of Vanessa and my mother at a lunch. Vanessa was holding a glass of wine, laughing. "Honesty is the best policy," she told the camera, her voice slurring slightly. "Some people just don't have the vision. My sister, bless her heart, she's so corporate. She thinks everything is about spreadsheets. She tried to tell Mom and Dad that I shouldn't get this money, that I wasn't ready. Can you believe that jealousy? But my parents know talent when they see it." My mother laughed in the background. "She's just practical, Nessie. You're the artist." I froze the video. She tried to tell Mom and Dad that I shouldn't get this money. That was a lie. I hadn't even known about the money until today. But the implication was clear. Vanessa knew I had asked for money. She knew about Lily's surgery. My parents had told her. They had discussed my dying daughter's needs, compared them to Vanessa's boutique, and they had decided that Vanessa needed to be protected from my jealousy. They had painted me as the villain trying to block Vanessa's blessing, rather than a mother trying to save her child. Vanessa wasn't just a spoiled brat, she was malignant. She knew exactly what that money was for, and she took it anyway. She had probably manipulated them, played the victim, cried about how Emily always gets everything, which was laughable until they opened the checkbook. And my parents, they weren't just enablers. They were complicit in a way that was unforgivable. They were gambling with my daughter's life to keep peace with a narcissist. I looked at the clock. It was 4:00 p.m. on a Friday. If I was going to do this, I had to move fast. I needed to be the corporate sister they mocked. I needed to be the cold, unfeeling financial analyst who only cared about spreadsheets. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of a real estate attorney I worked with frequently. He answered on the second ring. "Mark, it's Emily Miller," I said, my voice steady, devoid of the trembling sadness that had plagued me for weeks. "I need a favor. I need to draft an immediate notice to quit and a notice of intent to sell. Today." "Sure, Emily," Mark said, sensing the shift in my tone. "What property are we talking about?" 442 Lakeview Drive, I said. "The place your parents live in?" he asked, a note of confusion in his voice. "The place I own," I corrected him. "And Mark, I want to list it on Monday. I want it on the market for a quick cash sale. Undervalue it if we have to. I need liquid capital in 30 days. "That's aggressive," Mark noted. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said, watching Lily sleep, "but it's about to be." The morning after I found the deed, I didn't go to the hospital immediately. I had to treat this day like a workday, perhaps the most important workday of my career. I sat in a coffee shop 2 blocks from Mark's office, the bitter taste of espresso doing nothing to cut the sourness in my stomach. I had the physical file in front of me, the original purchase agreement, the deed, and the 10 years of tax records I had quietly maintained. My phone sat on the table, silent. I had blocked my mother and father temporarily. I needed clear air. I couldn't risk them guilt-tripping me before the trigger was pulled. Mark's paralegal had emailed me the draft of the notice to quit and the notice of intent to sell. Reading legal language directed at your own parents is a surreal experience. You are hereby notified to vacate the premises. Tenancy at will terminated. It felt cold. It felt cruel. Then I looked at the time. 9:00 a.m. Dr. Aris would be doing rounds right now. He would be checking Lily's oxygen saturation. He would be looking at the monitor and calculating how many days her heart had left before it simply gave up. The cruelty wasn't in the paperwork. The cruelty was in the bank transfer my parents had made to Vanessa. The cruelty was in the champagne toast they were planning for Sunday while my daughter lay in a sterilized room fighting for every breath. I signed the documents digitally and hit send. "Proceed with service," I typed to Mark. "Use a process server, do not mail it. I want it hand-delivered." I closed my laptop, but I didn't leave. I needed to know more. If I was going to war, I needed to know the enemy's terrain. My parents had claimed liquidity issues. Yet they had $140,000 for Vanessa. Where did it come from? I had power of attorney for my father from a minor surgery he had 3 years ago. He had likely forgotten to revoke it. It was a long shot, but I logged into his primary banking portal. It worked. The password hadn't changed. It was still Vanessa 1995. Of course it was. I navigated to the transaction history. My eyes scanned the lines, and the story of their betrayal unfolded in black and white. They hadn't just scraped together savings. They had cashed out a life insurance policy, a policy my grandfather had set up for them. It was a tax-free, lump-sum payout. The deposit of $148,000 had hit their account 10 days ago. 10 days ago. That was the exact day I had called them crying, telling them the insurance denial had come through. They had the money sitting in their account while I was begging them at their dining room table. When my father looked me in the eye and said, "We don't have the liquidity," the money was already there. It wasn't tied up in stocks. It wasn't in a 401k that would incur penalties. It was cash, sitting there. They had simply decided that Vanessa's boutique was a better investment than Lily's life. I kept scrolling. I saw the transfer to Vane's Vanity LLC, $140,000, gone. But then I saw something else. A recurring monthly payment to a storage facility in the city, $300 a month. They lived in a 4-bedroom house on a lake. Why did they need storage? I clicked on the check image. The memo line read, "Vanessa inventory." I cross-referenced the dates. They had been paying for this unit for 2 years. Vanessa had been storing inventory for a business that didn't exist yet, or was this the debris of her previous failures? I switched tabs to the state's business registry. Vane's Vanity LLC was filed 3 weeks ago, but there were other filings linked to Vanessa's name. Nest Jewels LLC, dissolved tax lien. V Lifestyle Blog Inc., dissolved admin dissolution. I dug deeper into the public court records. Vanessa had been sued by a previous landlord for unpaid commercial rent 2 years ago. The judgment was for $12,000. It was marked satisfied. I checked my parents' bank history again for that date. There it was, a check for $12,000. The pattern was undeniable. They had been bailing her out for years, covering up her failures so she could pretend to be a success. And now, they had given her the biggest bailout of all, funded by the one safety net that should have been used for an emergency. I wasn't just fighting for money anymore. I was fighting a sickness that had infected my family for decades. They were willing to let Lily die to keep Vanessa's delusion alive. I took screenshots of everything. I downloaded every statement. I built a folder titled Evidence. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark. Service completed at 10:45 a.m. Individual identified as Robert Miller accepted the documents. He seemed confused, advised him to contact his counsel. The trap was sprung. I didn't have to wait long. 11 minutes after Mark's text, my phone began to vibrate. It was my father. I watched it ring, letting the buzz rattle against the tabletop. I took a slow sip of my water. I needed to be calm. I needed to be the ice to their fire. I answered on the 5th ring. "Emily," his voice wasn't just loud, it was thundering. I could hear the vein popping in his forehead through the receiver. "What the hell is this? A sheriff just came to the door. He handed me an eviction notice. Is this some kind of sick joke?" "Hello, Dad," I said, my voice level. "It's not a joke. It's a legal notification. You have 30 days to vacate the property." "Vacate?" he sputtered, choking on his own rage. Are you insane? This is our house. We've lived here for 10 years. You can't evict us. Actually, I can, I corrected him. Because, as you know, I own the house. My name is on the deed. I pay the property taxes. You have been living there as tenants at will, and I have decided to terminate that tenancy. You ungrateful little. I heard my mother screaming in the background, hysterical. Give me the phone, Bob. Give it to me. There was a scuffling sound, and then my mother's voice pierced my ear. Emily, have you lost your mind? How could you do this to us, after everything we've done for you? What have you done for me, Mom? I asked, genuinely curious to hear her answer. We raised you. We let you stay with us that summer after college. We love you. You love me, I repeated. That's interesting, because 3 days ago, I sat at your table and begged you for a loan to save my daughter's life. You told me you had no liquidity. You told me you couldn't touch your nest egg. That's financial reality, Emily. We can't just. I saw the bank statement, Mom. The line went dead silent. The hysteria cut off instantly, replaced by the heavy, suffocating silence of being caught. I know about the insurance payout, I continued, my voice hardening. I know you had $148,000 cash sitting in your checking account while I was crying in your kitchen. And I know you transferred $140,000 of it to Vanessa for a clothing store. You hacked our accounts. My father's voice was back, lower now, trembling with a mix of fear and defensive anger. That's illegal. I have power of attorney, Dad. Remember? You gave it to me when you had your hip surgery. You never revoked it. I didn't hack anything. I just looked at the truth. It's not the same, my mother cried out, pivoting to her favorite tactic, emotional manipulation. Vanessa needed a start. This is her dream. Lily is sick, yes, but surgery is risky, we thought. We thought it was better to invest in something with a future. The words hung in the air, toxic and irreversible. Invest in something with a future. They had written Lily off. To them, my daughter was a bad investment. Vanessa's boutique was the growth stock. That, I said, my voice shaking slightly despite my best efforts, was the wrong thing to say. Emily, listen. Dad tried to take control, his businessman voice emerging. You're upset, we get it, but you can't sell the house. That's our home. We have nowhere to go. The market is terrible right now. You have 30 days, I said. I'm listing it on Monday. I need the liquidity D. Add, I have a surgery to pay for. Since you couldn't find the cash, I had to find it in my own assets. And unfortunately for you, your home is my biggest asset. We won't leave, he threatened. We'll fight this. I'll call a lawyer. I'll claim squatters' rights. I'll tell everyone what a heartless daughter you are. Go ahead, I said. Call a lawyer. Show him the deed where I bought the house to save you from bankruptcy. Show him the years of zero rent you paid. And while you're at it, tell him about the $140,000 gift you gave Vanessa while claiming poverty to me. I'm sure a judge will be very sympathetic. You wouldn't dare, he hissed. I'm doing it for Lily, I said. And unlike you, I will do literally anything for my child. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of finally, after 34 years, cutting the strings. The silence following the phone call lasted exactly 2 hours. Then, the flying monkeys arrived. The first text came from my Aunt Brenda. Emily, your mother called me in tears. She says you're throwing them on the street. I knew you were cold, but this is evil. Call them and apologize immediately. Then came a message from my cousin Mike. WTFM, Grandma is rolling in her grave. Fix this. They were controlling the narrative. They were spinning a story where I was the greedy, vindictive monster evicting 2 elderly pensioners for no reason. They had conveniently left out the part about Lily. They always did. But the real escalation came at 2:00 p.m. when Vanessa finally deigned to contact me. She didn't text. She FaceTime called me. I accepted the call. I wanted to see her face. Vanessa was sitting in what looked like her new boutique. The walls were half-painted a garish pink. She looked disheveled, her mascara smudged. Are you happy? she screamed the moment the connection stabilized. Are you happy now? Mom and Dad are having a breakdown. Dad is clutching his chest. They should probably see a doctor, I said calmly. I hear stress is bad for people who lie to their children. You are just jealous, Vanessa shrieked, pacing around the empty store. You've always been jealous of me. You can't stand that I'm finally succeeding, so you have to blow everything up. You know, if you sell the house, they can't help me with the next install payments. You're sabotaging my business on purpose. I don't care about your business, Vanessa, I said. I care about the $140,000 they gave you, the money that was supposed to save Lily. Oh, stop using that kid as a shield, she spat. Kids get sick. It happens. But this is my career. I signed a lease, Emily, a 3-year lease. Dad co-signed it. If they don't have the assets, the landlord is going to void the contract. You are ruining my life. I froze. Dad co-signed the lease. Yes, obviously, my credit is building. And what assets did he list to qualify as a guarantor? I asked, my analyst brain clicking into gear. The house, duh. It's $1 million property. A dark smile spread across my face. Vanessa, Dad doesn't own the house. I do. What? She stopped pacing. If Dad listed the lake house as his asset on a commercial lease application, I said slowly, enjoying every syllable, then he committed bank fraud. And if you knew about it, you're an accessory. You're lying, she whispered, the color draining from her face. Ask him, I said. And here's the reality check, Nessie. I'm selling the house. The sale will be public record. Your landlord is going to find out that his guarantor is worth nothing. Your lease is going to implode. And that $140,000 you already spent, you're going to be sued for the remainder of the contract. You have to stop this, she pleaded, the arrogance vanishing, replaced by pure, selfish panic. You can't sell it, just wait a year. Please, don't do this to me. Give me the $140,000 back, I said. Right now, wire it to the hospital. I can't, she stammered. It's gone. I paid the contractor, I paid the deposit, I bought the inventory, it's all gone. Then I'm selling the house, I said. I'll tell everyone, she threatened, trying to regain ground. I have thousands of followers. I'll tell them you're abusing our parents. Do it, I challenged her. Post it, and I'll post the receipts. I'll post the timestamps of the transfers. I'll post the medical bills. I'll show the world that you bought pink paint and knockoff handbags while your niece was dying. Let's see who the internet sides with. She stared at me, her mouth open, unable to find a retort. For the first time in her life, her tantrums weren't working. I'm blocking you now, Vanessa, I said. Tell Mom and Dad the realtor is coming tomorrow at 10 a.m. to take photos. If they aren't dressed, I suggest they hide in the closet. I ended the call. I sat back, my heart pounding. I had the leverage. They had committed fraud to get that lease. My pair. NTS were exposed. Vanessa was exposed. But as I looked up, I saw Dr. Eris standing in the doorway of the hospital room. He wasn't smiling. Emily, he said softly, can we talk outside? My stomach dropped. The war with my family had been a distraction, a way to channel my rage. But the real war was happening in this room, and I was terrified I was losing it. Is it Lily? I asked, standing up so fast I knocked my chair over. She's had an episode, he said gravely. Her oxygen levels dipped significantly. We stabilized her, but the timeline has moved up. We can't wait a month. We might not even have a week. The world tilted on its axis. 30 days to sell a house? I didn't have 30 days. I needed that money now. I looked at my phone. I looked at the evidence folder. I looked at the contact for my father. I realized I couldn't wait for the sale. I had to break them completely. I had to force them to liquidate their own lives, to beg, borrow, or steal that money back from Vanessa's sinkhole of a business, and I had to do it immediately. I wasn't just an evicted landlord anymore. I was a mother with a gun to her head, and I was about to pull the trigger on everyone. The celebration dinner was still on. Of course it was. Denial is a powerful drug, and my family had been overdosing on it for decades. It was Sunday evening. The sun was setting over the lake, casting a golden, deceptive glow over the house at 442 Lakeview Drive. My house. The driveway was packed. Aunt Brenda's sedan was there, Uncle Mike's truck, and right in the center, Vanessa's leased convertible, shining like a trophy. I didn't knock. I used my key, the key that legally was the only one that mattered. The sound of laughter drifted from the dining room. Clinking glasses, the smell of roast beef and red wine. It was a scene from a Norman Rockwell painting, if Rockwell painted narcissists who sacrificed children for handbags. I walked into the dining room. The conversation died instantly. There were 12 people around the table. My parents sat at the heads. Vanessa was in the middle, wearing a sequined dress that cost more than my car payment, holding court. Emily, my mother half rose from her chair, her face flushing a mix of anger and embarrassment. We didn't think you were coming, especially after your little stunt on Friday. She's here to apologize, Aunt Brenda declared smugly, taking a sip of her wine. Finally came to her senses. You can't just kick your parents out, Emily. It's unchristian. I didn't look at Brenda. I walked straight to the head of the table and stood behind my father. I could smell his cologne, the expensive stuff. He wouldn't look at me. He was staring at his plate, his knuckles white as he gripped his fork. I'm not here to apologize, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. I'm here to make a deal. We don't want your deals, Vanessa sneered. We want you to leave. You're ruining the vibe. The vibe, I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Vanessa, do you know why I'm really here? Because Dr. Eris told me yesterday that Lily doesn't have a month. She has days, maybe a week. A ripple of uncomfortable silence went through the guests. Uncle Mike shifted in his seat. Emily, that's terrible, but nothing, I snapped. I need $140,000, today, not in 30 days when I sell this house. Today. We don't have it, my father shouted, finally slamming his hand on the table. You know we don't, you saw the accounts, it's in the store. Then you better find it, I said calmly. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I tossed it onto the center of the table. It slid across the mahogany surface, knocking over a crystal salt shaker. What is that? My mother asked, her voice trembling. That, I said, addressing the whole room, is a copy of the commercial lease agreement for Vane's Vanity. I had my lawyer pull it from the public filing. I looked at my father. Dad, you listed 442 Lakeview Drive as your primary asset to guarantee the lease. You signed a sworn affidavit stating you were the owner of this property. The blood drained from my father's face, so fast I thought he might pass out. So, Vanessa challenged, though she looked less certain now, it's a technicality. It's bank fraud, I corrected her. It's a felony. And since the lease is over a certain amount, it's grand larceny by deception. I turned to the guests. My father used a house he doesn't own as collateral, and tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m., I am going to the landlord, and then I am going to the district attorney. Unless what? My mother whispered. She looked aged suddenly. The facade was cracking. Unless I have a wire transfer confirmation for the full amount of Lily's surgery by 8:59 a.m. We can't, Vanessa screamed, standing up. The money is spent, it's in the build-out, it's in the inventory, you can't key it back. I don't care where you get it, I said, leaning in close to her. Liquidate the inventory, return it, sell your car, sell your jewelry, Dad, cash out your remaining IRA, take the penalties, max out your credit cards, borrow it from Aunt Brenda, I don't care. You would send your own father to prison, Aunt Brenda gasped, clutching her pearls. Over money. I would send the Pope to prison if it meant saving my daughter, I spat back. They had the money, they chose a boutique over a life. Now they have to choose again, prison and homelessness, or the money. I looked at my father. The clock is ticking, Robert, you have 12 hours. I turned to leave. Wait, Dad called out. His voice was broken. He looked at Vanessa. Nessie, we have to return the inventory. No, Vanessa shrieked, knocking her wine glass over. Red wine stained the white tablecloth like blood. I can't. It's final sale. I'll look like a failure. I posted about it. You are a failure, Vanessa, Dad roared, the years of enabling finally snapping under the weight of his own self-preservation. You spent my retirement. You made me commit fraud. I am not going to jail for your dress shop. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. If we get you the money, will you stop the eviction? Will you let us stay? I paused at the door. I looked at the house I had bought to save them. I looked at the people who had treated me like an ATM for a decade. Get me the money, I said, and we'll discuss how much time you have to pack. The next 12 hours were the longest of my life. I sat in the hospital waiting room, my phone plugged into the wall, staring at my banking app. Dr. Aris had prepped the team. He told me that if the money cleared, they could rush Lily into prep by the afternoon. It's going to be tight, Emily, he had warned. Her heart is tired. At 3:00 a.m., my phone buzzed, a text from my mother. We sold Vanessa's car to CarMax. We're returning what stock we can tomorrow morning. Dad is at the bank opening the safety deposit box as soon as it opens. At 7:00 a.m., Aunt Brenda is lending us $20K. Please, Emily, don't call the DA. I didn't reply, I just watched the clock. 8:30 a.m., nothing. 8:45 a.m., nothing. I opened the contact for the district attorney's office. I had the number saved. I wasn't bluffing. I couldn't afford to bluff. 8:58 a.m. My phone chimed, a notification from my bank. Incoming wire transfer, $142,500. I let out a sob that sounded like a wounded animal. I fell to my knees in the middle of the waiting room, clutching the phone to my chest. They had done it. I didn't know how. I didn't care if they had sold their souls or their kidneys, but the money was there. I ran to the nurse's station. It's here. The funds are here. Clear the payment. The next 10 hours were a different kind of torture. Lily was wheeled away, looking so small on the gurney. She waved at me, a weak, sleepy wave. See you later, Mommy. See you later, baby. I paced the hallway until I wore a hole in the linoleum. I drank terrible coffee. I prayed to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. And then Dr. Aris came out. He looked exhausted. His scrub cap was in his hand, but he was smiling. She made it, he said. It was flawless. The defect is repaired. Her heart is beating on its own, strong and steady. I collapsed into a chair and wept until I had nothing left. It has been 6 months since that day. Lily is back in school. She's pink-cheeked, energetic, and currently obsessed with soccer. When I watch her run across the field, I sometimes have to catch my breath, remembering how close we came to the edge. As for my family, I kept my word. I didn't call the DA. I didn't report the fraud, but I didn't stop the eviction either. I gave them 60 days instead of 30. That was my mercy. The house sold for $1.1 million. I used the money to pay off the medical bills, replenish my savings, and buy a modest, lovely townhouse for Lily and me. The rest is in a trust for her college fund. My parents are living in a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighboring town. Their lifestyle has been drastically downsized. They have to live on Dad's reduced pension because they drained their savings to pay me back. Vanessa's boutique never opened. The landlord caught wind of the financial instability. I suspect Aunt Brenda gossiped and pulled the lease, keeping the deposit. Vanessa is currently working as a hostess at a chain restaurant. She blocked me on everything, but a friend showed me her latest post. It was a vague, passive-aggressive quote about toxic family and karma. I chuckled when I saw it. She's right about karma. It just didn't hit the target she thought it would. I haven't spoken to my parents since the closing. My mother sends cards. Miss my granddaughter, they say. Let's put the past behind us. I put the cards in the shredder. I didn't just save my daughter's heart that week. Avade my own. I cut out the rot, the guilt, and the obligation. I realized that family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up when you're drowning. They didn't show up, so I learned to swim. And looking at Lily, sleeping soundly in her new room, safe and healthy, I know I made the only trade that mattered. I traded a house and a toxic family for her life. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat.